All right, folks. Well, we'll give it another minute until we officially get it kicked off. Actually, why not? It's the top of the hour now. Look at that timing. So good morning, everyone. My name is Bobby Mann. I'm the Humane Rescue Alliance Chief Programs Officer. So excited and honored to be kicking off my Monday with my Maddie's family, co-hosting, facilitating this call with many of them. So it's good to see all of you. We're going to kick it off with a question of the day, and that is going to be, what is a program that you implemented in 2021 at your organization that you're incredibly excited about? So feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to unmute. We have a great presentation today, and something else I'm super excited about. We're going to be giving away some money. So I'll slow it down and see this chat start to pile up. And also, so many amazing hair days on this call. I saw Allison, your hair was looking fresh. Dr. Carley, my sister Sharon Fletcher, you got looking nice and curly at the bottom. Sharon, how are you doing? I want to check on you. How's your world?
Doing good. Thank you for asking. Yes, I actually did put some, curl in the hair today, just for this group.
I love it. I'm growing mine out a little bit too. Maybe I'll have a couple curls by summer.
There you go.
Who knows? Hey, Glenn, can you hear me? Glenn, I want you to introduce yourself to the group. You were here bright and early this morning, so take some time. Say hello. Tell people where you're from. Feel free to unmute too. He's like, this is so much pressure, dude. He's like, there's like 100 people here right now. Looks like he's chatting away. Okay, so let's see. Barn cat programs. I'm loving this. National Foster Care Support Remote Volunteer Program, NOVA. Love me a good acronym. Kim White, tell us about this community food bank.
Oh gosh, I didn't know I was going to be on camera. I am not having a good hair day.
No, it's all good. You can stay there. Hey, Kim.
Hey. So when I first started at this shelter, I work at Save Our Cats and Kittens in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And we are strictly a cat facility. Sorry, that's one of my vets calling. Free roaming. We try to do no cages, but when I first started, we didn't have a food pantry. There's nothing in our community that helps assist people who may be in times of crisis or need. And having been there myself in the past, I really wanted to get that started. And we have a lot of food that our supporters donate. We're strictly run on donations. We don't receive any taxpayer funding. So we strictly feed Purina products in our shelter, but we get tons of things donated that are perfectly good foods. We just don't feed them here in shelter. And so what we had done before was we donated to several cat colonies. We have other organizations that we work with, we donate with them, but I wanted to really open something up for our community. And so we started that, and I think as of last year, I think we donated over 1,500 pounds of food to not just our walk-ins, our community members, but to other established food pantries in the area, churches, other organizations that then divvy it out and use it in their food pantries as well.
So cool, Kim. Thanks for being here. And personally, I think your hair looks fresh. You look amazing. You're here on a Monday morning. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Wow, look at all these pet pantry programs. I love it. Actually, pet pantry is something that is now under my portfolio in my new job. And so I'm learning about all of the small intricacies in running successful programs. So folks that are just saying pet pantry programs, just know that I know how much work that is. And I am so incredibly impressed by that. Steve M., you are doing all the things. Tell us folks where you're from and brag a little bit about your organization.
Good morning.
What's up, brother?
So, we're a municipal shelter in rural Georgia. We've partnered with Best Friends, who has helped us modify our ordinances to create TNVR in the county and in cities. Our third-party TNVR did over 2,500 cats free for our county, which has never been done. partnered with Second Harvest, who has provided tons of food for pets, from PetSmart charities. And we started distributing to 4 other counties and helping them out. Since we have our stuff in play, we've started helping other counties. Partnering with Petco, we've been providing free vaccines for the public. We did over 1,200 vaccines last month, free of charge to the public. I waive impound boarding fees if the person gets their animal microchip. So no matter how much the cost is for the impound boarding fee, that is totally waived, and they pay $15 for the microchip, and that's it. So we're trying to provide a low-cost service to the community. Just got a modular building in. We're hopefully here in the next 12 months start our low-cost spay and neuter.
Steve, I believe as a municipal government organization, I heard you say you are also partnering with other counties. So you're spreading your wealth of awareness to these concepts to your community members and regional partners. So you're getting away from this is not my jurisdiction, this is out of my jurisdiction, right? So tell us about that.
Well, yeah, it's just I do first and ask for forgiveness later. So I just go to other counties that I know that are in need, and I do speak to their commission if need be. I speak on on behalf of our county, but pretty much it's not saying bypassing the commission, but getting things done and not having that barrier there. So helping them, sharing the knowledge, sharing the wealth, and getting them started also on these programs.
I love it, Steve. It's so good to see here. I want to pick on one other person who I have met recently, but I have just been so impressed with. Jacob Wallace. Can I pick on you for a second just to say hello to the crew and just tell folks where you're from, and also tell them what you did before you just got to your new gig?
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Jacob Wallace. I'm the Director of External Affairs here at Houston Pets Alive. We are a rescue, not a shelter, but we do partner with other rescue shelters, municipalities throughout the city of Houston. I like to consider us your rescues rescue, because if there's ever overflow and a need for support, we can provide. We just launched our, well, not officially, but we have a medical clinic on site for any veterinary care that we need to take care of for us. Prior to this, I was working with a civil rights nonprofit organization in the city of San Francisco called the A. Philip Randolph Institute. And then I dabbled into some consulting in public affairs throughout the city of San Francisco, worked on the general plan, and now I'm here in Houston, Texas, trying to leave a large footprint in animal welfare for the good.
I love it. And Jacob, coming from the work that you were doing to the work that you're doing now, what got you excited? And share some of the intersections. Like, what do you think relates?
Oh my God, where to start? So given an opportunity, number one, to work in community is a huge overlap. And I think what people don't realize where the intersectionality takes place is that a lot of our rescued animals come from communities that have been marginalized. They come from communities who are under-resourced. And then there's also a huge gap when it comes to education. So I worked on a lot of civic engagement initiatives where we had to do a lot of public education. And I think for us, the only way that we improve our industry, both internally and externally, is using those opportunities to partner with our cities, but also to partner with each other to educate the public. Like, this is why it's important to microchip. This is why it's important to spay and neuter. But it's no different than this is why it's important to go to annual checkups, right, at your free and low cost clinics, right? This is important to check in at your local food banks. This is important to vote. This is important to research and read on policies so you're not voting against yourself. There's so much overlap. And then when you start looking at legislation, we just wrote out new legislation here in the state of Texas that starts to look at how you house your dog or a cat. Well, you don't really have to house your cat, but just making sure that your cat is taken care of, make sure your dog's taken care of, looking at like what needs to happen as far as like water and shelter during certain hot and cold days throughout Texas. These are all things that overlap into like our real life situations. And not to go too far, but we have a pet health equity issue where normal families who are middle class and some who aren't can't afford the care that's needed. And so these are things that, like, as a whole, we should look at as organizations, is figuring out a way, how do we solve this problem, right? How do we stop the bleeding to where normal folks who work a regular job or even have a one household income can afford to take care of their pets if there's a cancer issue, if there's a need for amputation, heartworm, the list goes on and on and on.
Jacob, remind folks how long you've been in the animal welfare space.
I've been in for roughly since February. So
look at that, folks. Less than a quarter.
Yeah.
And he's given us $1 worth of information already.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
See this? And Amber, will you please introduce everyone to the youngest member of the Maddie's Fun family before we move on, please?
This is Henry.
Oh,
He's
so
6 months old.
Oh, God.
Thank you.
Amazing.
He had a little COVID scare at daycare, so we are hanging out with mommy for the week.
Well, for the folks that don't know, Amber and a lot of the others on the Maddie's team are the folks that make these calls possible. She's the one behind the scenes, making sure all the things are in place, and she's super momming at the same time. So thanks for normalizing parenting right now, Amber. I love it. All right, folks, let's go ahead and hop it over to national updates before I go over to my friend Irene to give away some Maddie's money. So national updates, we're opening the floor.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, my sister Jamie Kate's got to have something from Haas for us. Come on.
Well,
Go for it.
I actually don't have much, just because I'm joining the call because another meeting got canceled. So, but I'm happy to be here. And I just really wanted to say Happy Mother's Day. I think that there are quite a few of us on the call that are parents, and this for a long time was kind of an industry. There weren't a lot of mothers on doing this work. So I just want to say thank you for continuing all of this work, all of you moms out there. And I hope you all enjoyed your day yesterday.
I love it. Thanks, Jamie.
That was awesome. I don't know if anybody from Companions and Animals for Reform and Equity are on the call, or any of their upcoming panelist speakers might want to announce their May events. Otherwise, I'm happy to. So the month of May is also Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and CARE is putting on a few events this month. I will drop them in the chat. The first one starts today, so if you have time today, it's about Asian stereotypes in the media, and then the next two are more closely related to the animal welfare sector.
Thanks, Irene. I also want to just prompt in the chat based off of that. If y'all did not have a chance to watch their American Black History series, it was amazing. So please check that out.
I do actually have one more thing I want to add. There is the findhelp.com is putting on a social care impact summit, on a virtual summit this week. I'm looking for the link right now to throw in the chat, but they have some really great content. I know I am registered for a few of the seminars. It is free, and it really talks about really kind of the intersection of many human services, which I think we will be able to learn a lot from. So I'm going to find the link, throw it in the chat for anybody that's able to attend.
Thanks, Jamie. And would you also mind, just as always, throwing the link to the Job Alike peer groups? I just feel like there's such a cool place to meet other folks. If you have one more hour in your week to be able to meet people that are doing similar work, I highly suggest joining the Job Alikes. The other thing is, I very much just noticed I've been throwing around a lot of cisgender titles for folks. So also to all my non-binary siblings that are on this call, I love all of you, and I see all of you as well. Irene, let's give away some money. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go for it. So as many of you know, Maddie's Fund gives away monthly grants for joining us on these calls, either live or on demand. Amber Eby is about to drop the link to enter for this month over in the chat. So thank you, Amber. I am about to share my screen. so we can announce the April winners. And let's see. Oh no, don't look at that. Okay. Oh no. Sorry. Did you all see that already?
No. Everybody on this call was in a giant group text together looking at our phone, so none of us saw it. Don't worry.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right, April winners. Here we go. Tanya Dominguez from the Ramona Humane Society and Chris Harrigan from Fetching Retrievers Rescue. Each winner is getting $2,500 this month.
Amazing.
Congratulations.
I don't see a Tanya. Do I see a Chris? Chris, I see Chris on this call. Chris, are you here with us?
Yes, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I am so surprised and so thankful. And I've been learning so much and trying to pass along as much information and ideas as I can to our group. And we're relatively new, so this is an amazing gift for us. Thank you so much. This is our 3rd year now that we've been in existence. So yeah, this will really help. We've had some expensive dogs lately, so thank you very much.
So Chris, take another 30 seconds if you don't mind. And also your retrievers are so symmetrical behind your head. It's like an angelic version of shepherds or retrievers behind you.
That's by holding a treat. You know that, right? So we are based in Southern California. Our rescue is Fetching Retrievers Rescue.
Mhm.
And a lot of us came from a similar rescue, mostly golden retrievers. But we decided that there wasn't as many Goldens to rescue in Southern California. So a group of us decided to branch out and we went to all retrievers since that's something we know. We started in October of 2019, and we've grown quite a bit. We have about 75 volunteers. And like I said, we cover San Diego, Orange County, Ventura County, Riverside County, and Los Angeles County. We pull from shelters, we do owner surrenders. And one of the biggest things that I'm really proud of is that we partner with a lot of rescues. So we try and help other rescues where we can, if we have volunteers that are able and willing. And so, yeah, and that's about it. We're just excited, and we've been trying to power along with everybody else and get as many dogs saved as we can.
That's so cool. I'm going to call on Sharon since I rudely interrupted her while she was speaking up. Sharon, would you mind saying your question aloud for folks that are calling in?
I almost interrupted you, so I apologize. Chris, congratulations. And I was curious how you heard about the calls.
Well, I've been a big follower of Maddie's Fun. I think I probably got an email. I'm probably on every list that you can imagine. We are a partner of Best Friends in Calais. We started that immediately, and I've been, once we started, I think it was Strut Your Mud is one of the first ones they ever had, is how we first got involved with Best Friends. And in LA, actually, we were one of the largest fundraisers of the Strut Your Mud when I was with the other rescue. So I've decided this is just an amazing resource for any rescue. And I hope as many can reach out and let others know, because it's been a godsend for us in terms of knowledge and funding. So,
well, please invite your partners that you partner with and your volunteers to join as well.
I've been trying to get the volunteers on here as well.
See, the more of the volunteers that join, the more chances you have to win. That's for everybody. So
yeah, that's very good. I had a board meeting, and it's a lot of changing attitudes right now. So it's really interesting. It's trying to open up minds and things like that. So thank you.
Well, Chris, my last question, because just like a dog with a bone, I cannot miss an opportunity for a good dog dad joke. So what do you plan on retrieving with that $2,500 that you just won?
Oh boy. Well, we are starting. We've done the Maddie's We Foster Challenge this month, and we are really working and trying to gear up with some new foster resources, hard copy, plus some more social media, and some kind of merch, but lots of resources for our fosters, basically. So that's kind of where we're going to focus it on for this month, I think. luckily our expensive dogs right now are taken care of. We do have those bills to pay. We had a couple of $10,000 dogs, so that'll help. It'll go a long way. So thank you so much.
Well, congratulations, and we're happy to have you. And Peter Wolf, you know what? Don't be so judgy all the time. I'm trying my best over here. A pun won't hurt you once in a while, okay? Peter is one of my dear friends as well, so we're just giving each other a hard time. All right, folks, we are going to get into the tofu of this meeting and go on with our presentation about debunking the myths of dogfighting. I know we have Dr. Carley and Morgan here, but I wanted to, typically this is a time where I will introduce speakers and talk about them and talk about how their conversation sort of relates to the bigger picture, but I actually want to take it a different direction because these are two people that I respect and admire so much, and they're amazing speakers. They've been doing this for a really long time. They're people who, when you're trying to get into speaking at conferences, you want to really model yourselves after them. And what both of them did when they hopped onto this call is they shared that they were both dealing with certain things. One, Dr. Carley was dealing with something personally with a friend. Morgan has a migraine. And what they did is they walked into this space and asked people they trusted, our colleagues, for a little bit of grace to really just say, hey, today I'm going to bring the best version of myself, and these are the things that I'm dealing with. And to me, that just taught me so much about being a speaker and connecting and trusting the people that are on your call to watch you speak. So as I mentioned, both of our speakers, we need to bring some extra energy for them. So if we can give them a ton of shout outs in the chat just to cheer them on as they get this conversation kicked off. They might be on screen, they might be off screen. Things are going to be amazing because it's one of my favorite presentations I've ever watched. So Dr. Carley and Morgan, over to you.
All right, thank you, Bobby. Made me tear up a little bit. Let's see if I can share the screen again and do it properly.
And while she's pulling that up, I just have to say, I am so cheesy, but I love all the love on this call. So it's like so much love, and it makes my little heart so happy. It's, yeah, you guys are just the best.
I'm working on it. What, y'all don't see the presentation, do you?
So right now I think you'll hit presentation mode so right now we see the slides with your notes.
Okay, you do. Yeah, okay. All right, are we good now?
Perfect.
Fantastic. All right, all right, yeah, so thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Bobby, for asking for that extra energy and support for us today. But we're happy to and excited to talk about this presentation, but we will be talking a little fast because we want to get through all of the information, and there's a lot here. So as you'll see and hear, much of our talk will focus on some case studies for dogs that come from this background that both Morgan and I have been involved in. As Bobby said, I'm Dr. Carley Faughn. I'm an animal behaviorist and the senior strategist for life-saving research at Best Friends Animal Society. Prior to this role, I used to oversee Dogtown, a few other animal care areas at the sanctuary here, as well as the behavior team at the sanctuary. And I have a PhD in cognitive science with a focus on animal behavior and cognition. And I've worked with a variety of species in rescues, shelters, sanctuaries, from non-human primates to cats and dogs since I think 2007. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Morgan, and she's going to kick off this presentation for us.
Yes, hi. So I'm Morgan Rivera, and this is literally my favorite topic to talk about. I actually just graduated with a master's with a concentration in shelter medicine, and this was the focus of my final project. So very near and dear to my heart. And I agree with Jess, who said that Dr. Carley is the coolest person she knows. I second that. She is definitely the coolest person I know. So let's see, in addition to just graduating with my master's, I work for the Humane Society of the United States. I've been with them for about 5 years, or I think a little over 5 years now. Prior to that, I got started in the world of animal welfare in I think 2003, and I filled a lot of different roles, most of them either kind of on the behavior side or shelter management side. And a lot of what I've kind of had a common theme, and a lot of that has been dogfighting that has kind of woven its way into my various experiences. So I'm excited to be here and very happy that you all are taking an interest in this topic too. So with that, I'm actually going to turn my camera off because, like Bobby said, I have a super bad migraine right now, and it'll be easier for me to read notes. So Dr. Carley, you want to flip it to the next slide? All right. So let's dive right in. And something that I think many people may wonder about is, does dogfighting still exist? Why does it still exist? And the answer to that is yes, it does. And Dr. Carley will talk about this a little later on, but it has been made illegal in all 50 states. And you might be wondering, why is, if it's been made illegal, why is it still around? I think we could probably spend hours analyzing that, but of course we don't have the time for that. So we wanted to focus today more on the dogs and how we as professionals can best serve them. But I do think it's worth touching on the history because it does shed a little light on the present. So blood sports are something that have existed in some form or another for nearly as long as man has existed. From ancient Roman gladiators to modern day matadors, these sports are viewed as barbaric by some, probably everyone here today, but they are viewed as highly entertaining by others. And they can be human on human, such as boxing, human on animal, such as bullfighting, or animal on animal, such as dog or cockfighting. And regardless of the type of blood sport, it doesn't take someone that has really dove into like psychology to understand that these sports are in many ways used to prove one's masculinity or even just as a stand-in for their own conflicts. And in one article, the authors Kaloff and Taylor state, quote, dogfighting as a blood sport is centered around sexuality, masculine values, and the deployment of animals as symbols of a culture infused with macho aggression and menacing violence, end quote. The important thing to take away here is that at the end of the day, dogfighting isn't really about the dogs. It's much more about the people and society as a whole. And that is why you'll hear us say often throughout this presentation that we really should simply be treating these dogs as individuals. I can switch slides. All right, so let's just talk real quick about how dogfighting evolved here in the United States. And in the early 1800s, it became part of the American culture, and then it exploded in popularity after bull and bear baiting, which are other blood sports, became illegal in the 1830s. By the 1860s, professional fighting pits, which often had police and firemen in attendance, were quite common, particularly in the northeast part of our country. Where it rose in popularity largely due to an Irish immigrant living in New York City who went by the nickname of Kit Burns. The picture on the screen is actually a drawing from one of his pits. And he often had officers of the law in attendance and even participation. And dogfighting by law enforcement is something that is still an issue today. That might surprise people to learn that, but unfortunately it does still exist even within the law enforcement communities. And that's led to the inability to move forward with prosecuting cases despite there being ample evidence. Next slide. So in 1954, the gentleman on the screen here, Gilbert Trahan, also known as Gaboon, he wrote a rule book that is still used for organized dogfighting today. And you can note that on his bio, it actually says lifelong law enforcement officer. And his rules, which are known as the Cajun rules, are simple. And in a summary that was written by Mitch Kemmer, who's the son of a very infamous dogfighter named Norman Kemmer, he states, quote, the rules are basically common sense and meant to allow either dog the opportunity to stop the combat at any point that he, the dog, has had enough. Remember, it is a sport, and as long as all parties involved conduct themselves like gentlemen, it will remain so, end quote. So pretty cringeworthy. And I do want to pause here and give a little disclaimer. On the next slide, you're going to see some colorful language, but I did want to share it because this is the reality of what people that participate in dogfighting, what they think, like kind of where their mindset is. And then a little later on in the presentation, there's going to be another slide that also has colorful language. So Amber, I'm not sure if Henry can read yet, but don't let him look at the screen. All right, Dr. Carley can switch. So while Gaboon's rules are short and simple, I don't think it's worth going through all of them. It doesn't serve to benefit the message that Dr. Carley and I are going to try and spread today. But I do want to touch a little on the terminology because you'll see it throughout the presentation. So the first is game or gameness, and this is essentially the dog's willingness to continue fighting even after they've been gravely injured. The opposite of that is a cur, which is a term utilized by dog fighters to describe dogs that are not game. And there's really nothing worse to a dog fighter than if his dog turns, which means that they are attempting to disengage from the fight. At that point, they're deemed a cur, and it's not uncommon for them to be killed, often in a pretty brutal manner, in an attempt by the owner to regain some of their lost perceived masculinity. And the picture on the right side of the slide is actually a screen cap from a fairly well-known dog fighter sharing with the world what he believes it takes to be part of the game. So saying it again, dog fighting is about the people, not the dogs. You can switch slides. Okay, so let's touch really quickly on the different levels of dog fighters, because by understanding the different levels, I do think it, again, kind of helps us to understand some of the myths that we're going to debunk here in a little bit. So first, there are professional fighters who are individuals that have established bloodlines, have developed their own methods for conditioning their dogs before fights, and will only fight their dogs under a contracted match. Those matches typically have quite significant amounts of money being bet on the outcomes. Below the professional level are what's considered hobbyists or amateur fighters, and they don't usually have their own bloodlines yet, but they do seek out professionals to mentor them in the art of creating bloodlines, the art of conditioning, and then give them advice on who it is and isn't safe to work with, because again, they're very aware that this is illegal, so they have to be cautious who they share information with. And then below the amateur level are what are thought of as street fighters. And this is really less common today than what we once thought it was. The kind of street level fighters are people that are not going to participate in organized matches. They're going to allow fights to kind of occur quite literally sometimes on the street. And it's really more for that level. It's really just more about carrying out acts of violence rather than the true sport of dog fighting. So Chris Schindler, who is the Vice President of Field Services for HRA and St. Hubert's and a former Director of Animal Fighting and Cruelty at HSUS, so a former colleague of mine, he explained to me that the dogs that are kept on yards by professional dog fighters today are not cared for in nearly the way that they once were. Today, law enforcement is actually able often to get warrants despite there being, or with a lack of proof of dog fighting. They are so under cared for that they can get warrants just for things like neglect, cruelty, which is easier to prove. And some of the old timers have been taken out of the game, if you will, through arrests and good stuff like that. So I don't mean to glorify the old days, but it is important to know that it has in some ways become easier to get warrants and arrest some of the individuals. You can switch slides. All right, so let's pause here and just break away from all of that yuck and do a little case study. This is Stephanie, and she was part of a seizure that we did last summer in North Carolina. And the whole case was actually thanks to Stephanie and the officers that found her. They had just taken a course that HSUS presents on identifying signs of animal fighting. And they were at this property on a drug-related search warrant, noticed the signs that they had just learned about that were indicative of dog fighting. And they asked the owner if he wanted them to take two of his dogs that were in really poor condition, Stephanie being one of them, to the vet for him. And this defendant was so confident that he was smarter than the police and they wouldn't notice all of the very obvious signs of dog fighting that he told them to go for it. And in fact, according to him, Stephanie was his favorite dog. And despite that, when she arrived at the shelter, she was a BCS2. This picture here was taken actually about 2 weeks after she'd been in the shelter, receiving proper care and nutrition, and you can still see prominently her hip bones and ribs. So she was like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. This girl was bouncing off the walls, just a total wrecking ball. And I think we kind of all fell in love with her that day. You can switch slides. So in this case, we were really, really fortunate to promptly get custody of the dogs. And Stephanie, along with 6 other dogs, went to a partner of ours. And I brought in the president of the rescue, along with her helper dog, to the shelter to meet the survivors and help us get a sense for how they were going to do with other dogs and kind of help her gauge where she was best going to be able to place them. So I'm going to pause and call myself out here because I allowed what the defendant said about her being his favorite dog to color how I went into the meeting the meeting between the helper dog and Stephanie. And we muzzled her, and I was, just in an abundance of caution, we muzzled her, and I anticipated it to be a very short interaction, and I thought she would show us that she was not going to do well with other dogs, but I was completely wrong. She was immediately a total mushball and did amazing meeting the other dog. So shame on me for giving too much weight to her history. That's why you'll continue to hear Dr. Carley and I say to treat them as individuals and look at the dog right in front of you. So Stephanie went on to be fostered by a lovely family in Brooklyn. She was the rock star of the dog parks and totally stole the hearts of everyone that met her. And she has now been adopted by a family. The husband is actually a police officer, which I really love. I feel like things just kind of came full circle for her. And they have 2 daughters, one of whom actually has autism and has finally found a best friend in Stephanie, which I think is just beyond heartwarming that this little dog came from the background she came from and now snuggles in bed with a little girl that hasn't really ever had a friend before. So, all right, let's switch slides and get back to business. Okay, so we're going to talk about the myths, and one of the big myths that surrounds dogfighting is that the dogs enjoy it. So flourishing is a concept that is used by some dog fighters to defend their sport. And their stance is that fighting is in the nature of pit bulls, and that by not allowing them opportunities to fight, you're not allowing them the ability to express their truest selves. As you guys know, free roaming street dogs are never going to organize themselves and carry out matches the way that dog fighters do. And of course, dog fights do occur by street dogs and owned dogs of all breeds alike, but the organized manner in which dog fighters carry out this sport is obviously not naturally occurring. And in fact, professional dog fighters often have to breed litter after litter of dogs just to get one that exhibits the traits that they're looking for. There was an infamous dog fighter that actually, this is a real story, he dug up a bone from a grand champion named Jeep, and he took that bone to different labs around the country in attempts to have the dog cloned. And despite spending tens of thousands of dollars, he was unsuccessful. And today he has the stuffed corpse of one of Jeep's offspring in his home. And in another incident that a confidential informant made us aware of, he witnessed one dog fighter kill over 20 dogs in one day because they were not displaying the traits that he sought. And he was frustrated for having bred so many litters and not produced any dogs that he deemed capable of fighting. So I share these gruesome stories to hopefully illustrate for you the great lengths that professional dog fighters will go to just to get 1 or 2 dogs that will participate in fights for them. So to say that it's in their nature is just simply wrong. You can switch slides. Will Grigsby, a professional boxer who turned to dogfighting after he ended boxing, once said, quote, "To me, it's just like boxing. It's cruel if you put a pit bull on a poodle or a pit bull on another pit bull that don't want to fight. But if you have 2 dogs that weigh the same amount in an organized dog fight, well, that's just like boxing," end quote. So this is clearly an example of a fighter that believes that by fighting his dogs, he's allowing them to flourish. And the truth is there's a complete range in personalities of fight best dogs, the same way that there's a complete range in personalities of all dogs. So I've met into the hundreds, I don't know the exact number, but hundreds of survivors over the year. Every dog in this presentation is from a fighting case. And I've had the honor of sharing my home with some spunky young dogfighting survivors, as well as some old lazy mamas. You can switch slides. So on the opposite end of the spectrum from dogs like Stephanie that grew up in this life and were probably, they saw a lot. There are dogs like Solo, who is the next little case study I want to talk about. And she was adopted by a dear friend of mine who's the president of a pretty rad pit bull specific rescue. And they focus their efforts on pit bulls specifically from fighting busts. So Jessie loves the spirit and drive that exists in some of these pit bulls, and she actively seeks out ones that might be too much for the average adopter. But what she does is really cool. She channels that drive into appropriate sports, and as you can see here, has some really, really rad dogs. She lovingly refers to them as her 5-pack. And Solo, the girl that I'm gonna focus on, is that little cutie up in the front that has the purple sweater. You can switch slides. So Solo was rescued from Detroit PD when she was just a puppy along with her litter mates. And Jessie was called in to see if she may be able to assist by taking some of the dogs. And Solo was one of the lucky pups that got to join the rescue group. And Jessie was actually the one that ended up fostering her. And then she never left. So next slide. As a puppy, Solo was fed infant formula by the defendant. And she was really underweight. She was not thriving. She was struggling with a lot of GI issues. And in the beginning, Jessie had a really hard time at getting weight on her and getting everything under control with her GI issues. Next slide. And Jessie says that Solo has actually taught her an awful lot about training and the need to go slow and meet the dog's needs that's right in front of you. Solo was a very sensitive puppy and she would completely fold under pressure. So despite being incredibly smart, she needed to learn things at her own careful pace. And Jessie learned how to free shape thanks to Solo, which is something she's very proud of. And Solo's roster of tricks is ridiculously long. She can sit, stay, down, climb, orbit, sit pretty, go through, play disc, flip for the disc, and a whole bunch more that I'm sure I'm forgetting. Next slide. So I wanted to end on this picture here of Solo with her family because they're an incredible example of what it means to treat each dog as an individual. Punk on the left side of the vehicle is from a dogfighting case with the ASPCA, and she was in their custody in a temporary shelter for years where she was deteriorating due to not having her needs met. And euthanasia was being considered due to her poor quality of life, but they finally did allow Jessie to foster her in witness protection, if you will. And it took them 3 years before her hold was released by the courts, and she was finally able to be adopted. On her right is Simon, who was adopted as a puppy, and then years later was found in an apartment with his owner who had passed away from a gunshot wound. And Simon was severely dog aggressive, but as you can see, he's learned how to happily coexist and live along with other dogs. Then you have little Luna in the middle, and she is just the cutest, spunky little thing. She likes to parkour across fences to catch squirrels, and she has a heck of a prey drive, but she's also an incredible puppy raiser. And then next to her is Solo and Zephyr, and again, they come from various backgrounds, but I'm realizing I need to speed up here. So anyways, the point of this, treat all dogs as individuals. And before Dr. Carley advances, I'm giving you that second little disclaimer that there's some colorful language. So you can switch slides. All right, so let's talk about what is likely the most prolific and damaging myth of them all, which is bait dogs. So plain and simple, I want to be super clear that this is a myth. Chris Schindler, who I mentioned earlier, has at this point in his career literally investigated thousands of dogfighting cases and says that not one single time has he found a shred of evidence to indicate a dog was used as bait. Even confidential informants, something that we utilize a lot in these types of cases, as well as members of law enforcement that have been embedded in fighting operations for months, even years, they all report that there's been 0 instances of dogs being used as bait. So bait dogs would serve absolutely 0 purpose for the dog fighters. And excuse me, they're never going to engage their dog in a fight if it isn't a contracted match with a dog of the exact same weight where money is being bet on the outcome. So remember, dog fighting, like the other blood sports, exists not just to show off the owner's masculinity, but also to hopefully win those owners lots of money. So that brings me to our slide here, and I can allow the dog fighters to actually debunk this myth themselves. It's a little hard to read because it's a screen grab of an old messaging board, which is dedicated to dog fighters under the guise of discussing pedigrees. And one of the men shares a news article about trunking, which is a completely ridiculous myth that we're not even going to take the time to talk about today. But he says to his fellow dog fighters, where do they come up with this blank? I guess the bait dogs were not bringing in the donations anymore and they had to make this blank up. And then a person responds about wanting to cull those of us that bring them heat. But the point here is that the dog fighters quite literally laugh at us when we perpetuate this particular myth. You can switch slides. So along the lines of the bait dog myth is the myth that all dogs with scars must have come from fighting rings. So again, this is simply false. Dogs with heavy scarring can be in this state for a variety of reasons. They may have come from an environment where resources were limited and it led to fights. Maybe they're an adventurous pup and they just got into trouble out in nature. It's hard to say, but to label any dog with scars as having either been a bait dog or part of a fighting ring serves no benefit other than to perpetuate myths and stereotypes that can literally cost dogs their lives. In a paper from 2016 by Miller et al., they state heavily scarred dogs are often assumed to be dangerous and may be euthanized for this. Next slide. So while there are other myths that pop up in the media from time to time, such as the trunking that I touched on just a minute ago, the final myth that I do want to discuss today is that dogs from fighting rings are aggressive. I'm going to try and skip ahead here because I know we're running out of time. So I think something that if you're here today, it's pretty safe to assume that you've had plenty of experience with pit bull type dogs that have scars and yet are extremely friendly. And I don't think that we need to convince you that this is true. But if you look at this myth through the lens of a dog fighter, you can better understand why human aggression in fighting dogs is not only undesirable, but unacceptable. So I hope none of you have had the displeasure of witnessing a dog fight or watching hidden cam footage from them, but I have, and I can tell you that the dog fighters are right there in the pit with the dogs, inches from their face, cheering them on. So when a dog turns or if a referee calls a break for any reason, the handler needs to be able to collect their dog and move them to the edge of the pit. So if a dog were to display any sort of aggression towards their handlers, they're at a minimum not going to be used for breeding or fighting, but they're very likely going to be killed. So there are ample stories from dogs going on from fighting backgrounds to become therapy dogs, dogs like Stephanie, who is a best friend to a young autistic girl. And I think that really kind of proves that an affiliation towards humans is actually a desired trait by dog fighters. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Carley. Hopefully we shed a little light there on some of the myths.
Yeah, and Dr. Carley, feel free to take it all the way to the top. I don't need to say anything to close out, so use all the time.
Okay, thank you. I'll still maybe talk a little fast, but so yeah, we're switching gears now to a brief research and literature review on this topic, which we have found to be a little limited, especially in regards to helping dogs that come from this background. But Lee et al. Identifies that even pit bull guardians feel the pressure of myths and the false stigmas, and sometimes will identify their dog as a different breed than pit bull and argue to others that their dog is not innately aggressive. Twining et al. Discusses again that some pit bull guardians train their dog to engage in public appropriate behaviors, so others do not perceive them as threatening. As most, if not all of us know on this call, the Michael Vick dogfighting case in 2007 was heavily highlighted in the media. But I want to note that after this was highlighted in the media, it became more aware to our police officials and others, and they learned a lot about what this means and how to identify these situations. So while the 2007 incident was a tragic situation, the ongoing media coverage likely contributed to policy changes in recognition of this horrible sport. I don't have time to go into all of the details of these policy changes that were in the implementations, but ultimately what was put in place was that it is unlawful for any person to knowingly sell, buy, possess, train, transport, deliver, or receive any animal for purposes of having the animal participate in an animal fighting venture. Also, specific felonies penalties were included for these policies, and they would make it so that all participation in dogfighting, including being a spectator at a dogfight and possessing dogs for the purpose of fighting, that's now a federal felony, and increase the maximum penalty from 3 to 5 years in prison. So we were interested in how dogfighting is revealed and studied and discussed in the academic literature. And what we found is that most studies focus on the following that you can see pictured here. But a brief overview is that the research or literature reviews that we conducted demonstrated that public participants responded to fighting videos in a wide variety of ways, very disturbing for them. The interest in how dogfighting is perceived and discussed was one of the papers. What types or characteristics of people participate in dogfighting, whether there's a relationship between dog scarring and dog aggression, as Morgan touched on. And again, reviews from interviews, police files, online reviews to understand how dogfighting is organized, who are the key human participants, and how much does this overlap with crime-related activities, such as drug dealing and illegal gambling. So ultimately, we did not find much research or literature reviews documenting specific case studies, statistics on what happens to dogs once rescued from these situations. And we feel strongly that more data needs to be reported for the public and professionals in animal welfare, so we can better understand various circumstances surrounding dogs from dogfighting backgrounds. So as you've heard Morgan say, and I'll say it more than her probably, but we argue that all dogs should be treated as individuals, even when coming from such tragic and horrific backgrounds as dogfighting. We don't want to make too many assumptions based on breed, and instead learn who the individual is, what are their likes and dislikes, what is exciting or potentially fearful for them when engaging in the real world. I'm a huge fan of functional assessments, and that's what we recommend, or ongoing interactions with the individual dog in a variety of settings, things like a real life room or a quick outing to a home to figure out how they can adjust and how we can help them, walking the dogs around town, interacting with known people versus new people and more, and documenting this in objective language. So we also encourage socializing dogs with dogs, even when coming from these backgrounds and based on your own observations. If you aren't comfortable with a situation or are unsure of how a dog might respond, then as Morgan mentioned, you can use a basket muzzle for additional safety and comfort level. We do encourage trying to desensitize the dog to the muzzle before doing this, but again, it depends on the dog's ability and willingness to cope with the basket muzzle. So in closing, I'm gonna go through two case studies real quick. And so this is Carley and Maya. Maya is on the left of the left picture. Carley is black and white. And they're two of the 22 dogs of the Victory dogs that were brought to Best Friends Animal Society. I want to start by saying that legal restrictions were put into place immediately regarding who was at that time adoptable, who was deemed adoptable, and then there was a group that would be required to pass the Canine Good Citizen program in order to be adopted. And that's the group that Carley and Maya fell into. So I'm going to share their journey, but I also want to talk about, or just mention that of the 22 dogs that came to the sanctuary, 13 of those dogs were successfully adopted, and the rest of them have lived out their lives with great pleasure at the sanctuary. So Carley arrived with the initial group, and Maya arrived a little bit later. When Carley arrived, the court case was still very active, and very little information was known about him or the other dogs at the time of arrival. There was a lot of skepticism at this time about whether dogs with this background could be rehabilitated. Everything was extremely public, as this was a high-profile case, and the ultimate goal when receiving the dogs was to keep them and everyone safe. So initially, the dogs received 24-hour round-the-clock care, often implementing crate and kennel rotations and taking them for walks throughout the days and nights. This setup actually worked really well for the dogs because since a lot of them were less socialized towards people, they had to go on leash for potty breaks and had opportunities to build relationships with the team. But again, the key thing was that with these interactions, nothing was really done differently than accepting any other dog into the sanctuary. Handlers and trainers observed and took notes about each dog, as I mentioned, as individuals and their reactions or responses to walking past other dogs out and about, walking past other dogs in kennels, and walking past other people. So again, really ongoing notes, functional assessments, recognizing how they are responding in a variety of environments. Again, the team still didn't really know much about the dog's behavior toward other dogs, so they took the information they could gather through the fence and eventually began to recognize which dogs appeared to really want to engage with other dogs and which ones might not or might need a little more help. So the team introduced the dogs as they normally would and used basket muzzles if they were a little more unsure. But again, these are the kind of interactions I was referring to paying. You want to pay close attention in these functional assessments, which is really just observing, noting what any interaction is with an animal in the kennel, outside of their kennel. So Maya came a little later after Carley. She was originally in a foster home, but due to her lack of human socialization, it was decided to bring her to the sanctuary. So being an all-Black dog, under-socialized to people, and who would bark when unsure, made some people unsure of her as well. At the sanctuary, interactions with Maya were again implemented with similarly to other dogs that had arrived to the sanctuary unsocialized. Hand feeding, getting used to people being around her, getting her used to the leash, and again, just other techniques that we would use with an under-socialized dog. So again, those that worked with Maya, Carley, and other dogs from the VIT case quickly learned about their individual personalities. While Carley was unsure of the world at times, in the office, he was a complete goofball. You can see him dressed up here. He appeared to really enjoy it. He was also very interested in your bag or backpack, and if you left it on the floor, then he would go to town and have a blast with it. Fortunately, Carley did love his crates, so when we weren't around, he would be crated because he would destroy the office and have a great time with it. So Maya ultimately became a helper dog for Carley because Carley was more unsure of the surrounding environments, and Maya was more unsure of people. But just to get Carley to go on a walk, Maya helped him tremendously to be able to do that. So again, treating all dogs as individuals. And again, so I had a great talk with Michelle Weaver, who was one of the Dogtown managers at the time when the dogs arrived. And what kept coming up in conversation with us was that, again, nothing was really done differently than any other dog entering the sanctuary. And they're simply looking at, who is the dog in front of me? How can we help them as an individual dog? And what, continue exploring that. So moving on to a different case study really quickly. This is Saru in the bottom picture with his run mate Kimbra. And Saru came to us with 6 to 7 other dogs from a dog fighting situation. Initially from the receiving shelter, formal assessments were conducted, including how each dog responded to a stuffed dog. But ultimately, we still didn't have a whole lot of information about these dogs that came to us. So again, implementing functional assessments. Saru was a dog that was a little shy at first and a little under socialized, but once you started working with him with treats and things like that, he quickly came around. And I wanted to take both of these dogs home so badly. So Kimbra helped Saru tremendously. At the sanctuary, we see a lot of running along the fence line, and that can cause some commotion sometimes, but including redirecting on the other dog. But fortunately, Saru wasn't like that. Kimbra wasn't like that. You can see Saru in the right picture, just watching Kimbra check out the neighbor dog. And yeah, so again, Kimbra became the helper dog for Saru. All right, moving on. Okay, so bringing this information all together, we have shared that dog fighting and animal fighting has been occurring for a long time, and is often used to raise status and often occurs with other criminal activities. As a result, dogs that come from these backgrounds tend to carry a stigma with them that is not always true, as a lot of us know. But other stigmas that Morgan talked about, that they're aggressive and want to fight and enjoy fighting other dogs, is typically not the case at all. So we continue to always treat each dog as an individual. It's up to us to teach any animal we work with to live in our human world. And I recommend doing this through building positive relationships with the animals we work with, while exposing them to the real world, and sometimes you need to help them build that confidence in certain situations. But I say that regardless of their backgrounds. So we strongly encourage you to foster and or adopt locally, of course, trying to use foster homes to learn more about the dogs in front of you, as we know that the shelter setting can still be very, very stressful for dogs. Foster homes, even if it's a short foster, a day, 2 days, whatever it is, we can learn a lot about the dogs in the home. So we realize that more data is needed on this topic, but for now, there are plenty of people who have their own success stories to share about dogs that come from dog fighting backgrounds. And oftentimes, if you didn't tell anyone that about their history, one would likely never know. So I'm going to show a quick video. Tell me if it doesn't work. 1 second, and the sound should work.
We're not seeing it on screen, Dr. Carley.
Is it working?
We hear the sound, but we just see the link still.
Shoot. Okay. I will pop the link in the chat. How about that?
Perfect.
Sad we can't see it though. Hold on. Maybe I can. Sorry.
We saw something pop up for just a second.
Do you see it
there?
now?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. I'm gonna start it over. It's a short video. I know we're beyond time. let's see. We are at the end. Just need to get there. All right. So there we go. We made it. This is our contact information. If you have any questions, you can take this down and you can email us our questions. Up to you, Bobby.
I'm just, as always, so impressed and so blown away. Morgan, Dr. Carley, this has been amazing. I also dropped for folks, I mean, we have 95 people still on the call after the hour, so we're so grateful to you. The link I dropped in the chat is from a peer group presentation that Dr. Carley and Morgan both did, which probably has a bit more comprehensive information regarding all these things. So if you want to unpack this a little further, be sure to check that out. Just know, Morgan, maybe I'll just toss it over to you for closing thoughts and send folks into their week.
Yeah, just thank you all for taking an interest in this. And like we talked about, we really can't impress enough on you how much you really just have to look at the dog in front of you. And it's hard to not let their history kind of color your thinking. I called myself out. I'm guilty of doing it. But they're deserving of every opportunity that we would give any other dog that came into our shelter or rescue. So we just encourage you to look at the dog right in front of you. And if you want more, success stories, I have, I don't know, probably hundreds. And I'm sure Dr. Carley does too. So if you ever want like a dose of real happy, just hit one of us up and we'd be happy to share that with you. If you ever have questions or you need advice on a dog right in front of you, we're happy to talk with you about that and lend some of our expertise. So yeah, just thank you for all being here. Dr. Carley, do you have any?
No, I agree. Thank you all for being here and staying with us past the time of this meeting. Morgan is truly the expert on this topic, but I'm very passionate about it as well. And I hope you all got something out of this presentation. So thank you.
I know I did. And happy Monday, everyone. Hope everybody has a wonderful week. And we hope to see you next week. So take care.
Bye, y'all.